Charlie, have you got any comments on that as to how something this crazy could have happened?
Well, it happened. It's almost a mania of speculation that we now have. We have computers with algorithms trading against other computers. We got people that know nothing about stocks being advised by stockbrokers who know even less.
I understand the commissions, though.
Yeah, it's just an incredible, crazy situation. And it's weird that we ever got a system where all this equivalent of casino activity is all mixed up with a lot of legitimate long-term investment. I don't think any wise country would have wanted this outcome. Why would you want your country's stocks to trade on a casino basis to people who are just like the people that play craps and roulette in the casino? I think it's crazy, but it happened, and it's respectable. Not with me, but with other people.
Yeah. Well, and look at what the country. I mean, they formed the New York Stock Exchange in 1792 under a buttonwood tree, and it really didn't seem like that was the eureka moment in America. But just look at what's happened using the system for less than, well, 3 of my lifetimes. I mean, it's unbelievable. So it's worked. Now, maybe it's worked in spite of itself, maybe with the country, but one way or another, America has worked in an incredible manner. Nobody could have dreamt it. Nobody. They'd have hauled you away if you said, in 3 lifetimes, that this place where we're meeting. I mean, it became a state in 1867, but 1789, it asked Ben Franklin or somebody that was walking out of the Constitutional Convention, what do you think the prospects are for Nebraska? It's unbelievable what's been accomplished, and it's been accomplished. The people who encourage the gambling, they would like to say it's been accomplished because of we've got these liquid markets and all these wonderful things. Charlie would probably say it's in spite of that. Who knows? But the answer is that well, there isn't an answer. My wife, when they got married, April 19th, 1952, we got in my aunt's car and we started driving west, and we ended up, we drove all over the West, but one night we ended up in Las Vegas. And there were 3 fellows out there. Eddie Barrick and Sam Zigman and Jackie Gone. And all 3 of these guys were from Omaha. And they'd bought little pieces of the Flamingo. Bugsy Signal had his career ended rather abruptly a few years earlier.
Bad bullet.
It was a stray bullet, undoubtedly. But in fact, there were probably 5 or 6 stray bullets. But in any event, Bugsy was gone, and some people, including 3 guys from Omaha, were in the group. Sam Zigman lived about 2 blocks from where I live now, and he was Stan Lipsey's uncle. Stan Lipsey ran, those of you who follow Berkshire, ran the Buffalo News and was a partner for 40 or 50 years later on. So all kinds of things intersect, but I walked into this casino or a Flamingo. It's kind of a motel-like arrangement. And I was 21, and my bride was 19, and I looked around the room, and there were all of these people, and they were better dressed then. It was a more dignified group than perhaps currently, but they'd flown thousands of miles in some cases, in planes that weren't as fast as the current ones and were more expensive, probably on a per mile basis adjusted. And they'd gone to great lengths to come out to do something that was mathematically unintelligent, and they knew it was unintelligent. And I mean, they couldn't do it fast enough in terms of rolling the dice, and trying to determine whether they were hot or whatever they may be. And I looked around at that group. Everybody there knew that they were doing something that was mathematically dumb, and they'd come thousands of miles to do it. And and I said to my wife, I said, I'm going to get rich. I mean, how can you miss? If people are willing to do this, this is a land of opportunity. Well, it's the way it still is. And the flamingo grew to be much bigger, and in Omaha, we're very proud of Jackie and things he did. He only died a year or two ago. He became sort of the leader, spiritual leader of Vegas, and like I say, Sam Zygmunt's nephew went on to save my and Charlie's investment that we made in Blue Chip in the Buffalo News. And, it's a very accidental society that occurs, but there's nothing stranger than what has happened in finance. On the other hand, if you go back, perhaps the greatest chapter ever written on the operation of markets, particularly the stock market, is in a book that probably one of the most famous books in economic history, the General Theory, written by John Maynard Keynes. I think it was 1936. And I don't know whether it's chapter, I think it's chapter 12, but whatever it is, he describes what markets are all about in 1936, and he describes something in beautiful prose that explains why the whole country in March of this year was sitting around trading Occidental in some crazy way that enabled us to buy a quarter of what wasn't owned by four other institutions that weren't going to sell. We were able to buy a quarter of it, and we could have bought a lot more. I mean, you just wondered if there was anybody that really was thinking about investment. Going back to investing, I mean, investing is laying out money now with the hope of getting back more later on. It's really laying out purchasing power, not with the hope of getting more purchasing power back. But that's the reason that's the way you learn in the textbooks, that you defer consumption now so you can consume more later on so that you can take care of your family. All these things about how investment takes place. And that is what happens with farms. I mean, somebody buys a farm, and they hope to leave it to their kids, or they got it from their parents. And I mean, they don't sit there every day and get quotes 15 times a day and say, I'd like to get a call. I'd like to sell a put on the guy's farm next to me, and you can have a call on mine, and then I'll have something called a straddle or a strangle or whatever it may be. And they go about making the farm worth more money, and they do the same thing if they got an auto dealership, and they do the same thing, if they've got an apartment house, they look for improve it and attract tenants, all those kind of things. And 40 trillion at least, of the ownership of all of the American business. People treat as poker chips, or pulling the handle, and they've got systems set up so that if you want to buy a 3-day call on a stock, you can do it, and they make more money selling you calls than if you buy stocks. So they teach you about calls. Nobody's going around selling calls on farms or anything of the sort, but that's why markets do crazy things, and occasionally Berkshire gets a chance to do something, and it's not because we're smart. It's because the only thing I'd say we qualify on, and sometimes I wonder about that, but I think we're sane. I mean, and that's the main main requirement in this business. And anybody, Charlie?
Well, I don't think we've ever had anything quite like what we have now in terms of the volumes of pure gambling activity that go on daily, and the people lathering the gamblers up so they can rook them. And it's not pretty. And I don't find it creates any great glory for capitalism or anything, any more than a bunch of people throwing dice at a table. What good does that do the rest of the world?
It's a great way to become rich, though. Just figure out ways to insert yourself into the system somehow. And jobs to some extent self-select. And many years ago, and I've got all kinds of friends in Wall Street. Not as many as I had before I had started talking this way an hour or so ago, but I really do. People make lots of decisions in life, and the truth is that overall, the American system has worked extremely well. It may be very unfair in many ways, but it has produced incredible difference in the goods and services available to me versus what my grandfather had available. I do not want to go back to pre-air conditioning and people pouring whiskey down me while they drill my teeth or something of the sort. This is a lot better world, and
I think we've made more because of the crazy gambling. I think it's made it easier for us net over the decades we've been operating.
Well, we've depended on it.
Yes.
We depend on mispriced businesses through a mechanism where we're not responsible for the mispricing of them. And overall, we learned something a long time ago that doesn't take a high IQ, doesn't take anything. It just takes the right attitude.